Camera 2's rolling. Camera 3's rolling. Action.
Welcome to Sugar and Spice, but not so nice. I am your host, Khadija, and today we have Gaby Fisher. And as I would like to call her and remain calling her Professor Fisher. She's a two-time finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in feature writing and a member of a Pulitzer Prize winning team at the Star-Ledger. She is also the winner of a Pulitzer Prize. Is that right?
Yes.
So, Professor Fisher, who are you? What do you do?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. Well, what I do and who I am are two different things, but they kind of go together in a way. Who I am is a person who is filled with so much love that I can't find enough people to give it to, and I really do feel that way. I feel like I was given a gift of a lot of feeling. What I do is write people's stories. I feel like I was put on this earth to help people who might not have a voice, help them to have a voice by, not everyone can write, but everyone has a story. So I like telling other people's stories, mostly people who would not otherwise have the chance to have their story told.
So, what is your story?
Oh my goodness. My story, I always tell my students at Rutgers that students come in and they think I'm a soccer mom or a soccer grandma, and oh, she has an easy life and she grew up in the burbs and no problems. My real story is that I grew up with an alcoholic mother who could rarely function. My father was never home, and my sister, I pretty much raised my sister, who was much younger. My mother died from alcoholism when I was young, and my sister was much younger. I pretty much just worked my way into what I do now. I work hard, I care a lot, and I have a lot of drive to do something that makes my life matter.
Yes, I know about your books, about your writing. Long narrative, that's your favorite. Yes, long narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what she teaches. I mean, she is basically instilling us, I was one of her former students, that long narrative is important. Because to maintain a story throughout a long narrative is difficult compared to writing 3 sentences and tell a story. Because we all can do that. But a long narrative takes time, I don't know what it takes.
It takes immersing yourself in that person's story or that story. You can't do a long narrative, a fly-by-night. You have to get to know people intimately. You have to set scenes. You have to get in people's heads. There's so much to it to be able to write a story that pulls people along so that you feel, the reader feels as if they are going through the story with the person, the characters in the story. It's a lot of work. I mean, I've had students who say, oh, I really want to write long narrative, and they just think it means sitting down at a desk and just writing their hearts out. And that's a beautiful thing, but that's not long narrative. Long narratives, in my experience, take, months at a time.
A lot of research.
A lot of research, a lot of interviewing, a lot of clearing your head so that you don't have any preconceived feelings about the story. It's presenting the story as it is. There's a lot to it. And writing and rewriting and rewriting. My students often feel a little put out if you ask them to go back and rewrite something. But the greatest writers on the planet rewrite things many, many, many times. It's part of the process.
Yeah, I don't think I have met yet somebody that writes in one sit and say this is what it is.
I never have. No, I don't believe it happens. Especially because when you're writing, it's almost like you own this thing. I hate it when people say they're giving birth to a story, because that's not what it is at all. But it's your creation, And so you really want to just make it the best it can possibly be. And the other part is, normally in narrative, you are telling someone else's story. And to do someone else justice, if they're going to give you the gift of giving you their story to tell, you need to make sure that you do everything you can possibly do to make it the best story that you can possibly make it.
I can choose different books, but After the Fire, a true story of friendship and survival. I know it's your favorite.
It's my favorite book, yes.
And I went to YouTube, I did a little scouting, and I remember that you were talking about the young man and how much they suffer throughout, and how important it is to know about how to protect ourselves in a fire. And tell us a little bit more about the story in itself, and how you came about spending time with these two young men and writing this book.
The story, it was the Seton Hall fire, where two kids set the freshman dormitory on fire. Sean Simons, who lives in Newark, and Alvaro Llanos, his roommate, who's from Patterson, were caught in the fire. 3 boys died, but both of them were critically burned. I went, when I was working at the Star-Ledger, I spent 9 months in the burn unit with Sean and Alvaro and documented their recovery. The idea was to write the story of what it's like to be burned, but really what the story turned out to be was this beautiful friendship that developed between these 2 young men, and their incredible character and how strong they were. Sean, who's from Newark, was less burned than Alvaro. Alvaro was burned over 66% of his body. His whole appearance changed. Sean almost lost his hands from crawling. His hands, he explains it that it was so hot and they were crawling through black smoke. They couldn't see anything. And his hands were sticking to the melting floor tiles. And so he almost lost his hands. But he recovered faster than Alvaro, and he made it his mission to will Alvaro to get better. And there were times, I mean, Alvaro was in a coma for 3 months. For 3 months, we sat by his bedside and just prayed that he would live until the next day. And the doctors didn't think he was going to live. He was so critically injured. But he did pull through with a lot of love and a lot of perseverance from Sean. So it's the story of these 2 young men and their backgrounds, and how they both came from families. They were the first in their families to go to college, ended up in this dorm room together. Were fine roommates, they got along fine, but then the fire happened and they became the best of friends. And today, their job is they travel all around the country speaking about fire safety and how important it is to get out of, when the alarm rings, you run no matter what, because otherwise the result is
What you see now.
what you see.
Choosing Hope, that book. I read the book. Actually, I have to say it. I have mentioned it before. I have the first copy of the book signed by Professor Fisher. Actually, I have a photograph of her signing the book.
It's one of my favorite photographs.
And Choosing Hope. Definitely she did choose hope.
Yeah, it was between choosing hope and
Allowing the death of these children to happen.
yes, and allowing herself to sort of sink into an abyss, because Choosing Hope is a story of a first grade teacher who saved her students, first grade students, from a gunman who broke into their school in Connecticut, Sandy Hook, Newtown. And the gunman went down the first grade corridor and just randomly went into classrooms and killed the teachers and the kids. He killed 20 children and 6 educators. And Caitlin, the woman I wrote about in Choosing Hope, was a teacher in the middle for some reason. Her classroom was right in the middle of the other classrooms where everyone died. And as soon as she heard the glass breaking coming into the school, for some reason, where others were kind of stunned and looking out in the hallway to see what was going on, she immediately took all of her kids. The only place to hide was this little tiny child's bathroom in her classroom. She stuffed 15 children into this tiny bathroom by piling them on top of each other, and they had barely any air to breathe. And then she closed the door and told them to be very quiet, and these little kids and Caitlin heard the carnage that was going on around them. But the gunman didn't find them. He was killed before he was able to find them, thanks to her. So afterward, the trauma was so great that she had to go to a therapist. She wondered if she was really alive. She thought people were lying and all of her students were really dead. And then one day, she would never go out of her house. She would go nowhere alone. And then one day she sat up and said, you know what? I have a choice to make here, and I'm going to choose hope. And that's really what she said. I'm going to be hopeful. I'm going to do something that matters. And she turned her whole life around. And she does the same thing Sean and Alvaro do now. She goes around the country talking to people about not losing hope, no matter how dire your circumstances are.
Something that when we first met, you asked us to ask you any question. Mm-hmm. And what I asked, I remember, was what was your most embarrassing moment as a journalist? Do
you remember what I said? Because there were a few. My most embarrassing.
Because I know you said exactly that. It was so many, a couple of them. So
I do remember going to Trenton. I was a younger reporter. I had to go to the State House, and I had to interview the governor's staff or somebody. And they walked me into this big conference room and sat me down at this table with all these suits. And I started dripping sweat. That my hair was soaked. I could feel the sweat dripping down the back of my neck, and and my heart started pounding, and I couldn't think. And I thought, what am I going to do? So I said, I hope you'll excuse me, I have to go to the ladies' room. And I went to the ladies' room, and I held my hands under freezing cold water and put water all over my face, and then went back and tried to be very composed and finished the interview with sweat pouring down the back of mine. So that was embarrassing. I just pretended it wasn't happening.
It wasn't happening at that point, right?
Yeah. I'm sure there were many, but
I don't remember that one because I don't remember that.
Oh, that was awful.
Oh yes. Well, like this morning, I was beside myself. I couldn't even think twice of what I was trying to do. But actually, after I think the second or third one, I was okay.
Interviews?
Yes, I was okay. So
yeah,
but. This is worse because I tried talking about the Pulitzer Prize and so many P's and everything that I was trying to say. So, okay.
You're a great interviewer. You really are. You're a great listener, and that's what it takes. Yeah.
Something that I couldn't find much information, but I remember you talking about it. Mm-hmm. And then it always sticks in my mind because first, why you did it, and what was the reaction of people after you did that? She did a documentary on the alternative school.
Last Chance High.
Last Chance High. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it was a written piece in the Star Ledger, and I tried to look for some information more than that, and it's like hidden. It's like a little treasure hidden. If you don't know where to look for, you will never find it. But it's gonna come right here from the source. Tell me about that time. How long you spend with the children first?
A whole school year, and it was an alternative school in Orange, and it was for students who were thrown out of every other program, every other school from Orange and the surrounding area. And the way the story originated was I would drive to Newark every day from home, and I started noticing little kids walking down the street, and their parents were way ahead of them. And I used to think, if that little kid walked out on the streets, the parents would never even know it. They're not paying attention. And I started noticing this more and more, and I started wondering if maybe there was a whole population who sort of raised themselves, which I did. And so I started looking for those people. that one thing led to another. I met a man named the Street Doctor, who was a man who had gotten out of prison and who was on the streets talking to young people, encouraging them. And he took me on his speaking tour with him, and one of the places he spoke was the Valley School. I thought, what a great way to tell the story of kids who people judge, but people have no idea what's in here, nor do they have any idea what motivates these kids to sell drugs, to be a go-go dancer, to be a Crip, to be a Blood. And so I wanted to go into their lives, not just at the school, but into their neighborhoods and into their homes, and really tell the story. So I told the story of 3 of them. One was Tamar Bowman, who was a Blood and a drug dealer in Newark. One was Almalik Collins from Orange, who was a Crip. And one was Aisha Beatty, and she was from Newark, and she was a go-go dancer who had mental health issues. And I followed them. I spent a great deal of time with them and wrote a series called Last Chance High. It began with Mr. Orr, who was a gigantic 6'4" principal of Last Chance High. There were only 33 students there. The entertainment for the day there was who stole the Audi and drove past the school fastest. I mean, that's really what it was. It was like chaos every day, complete chaos. But to me, I knew that there was something in the soul of these people that needed to be told. And so, and that's exactly what happened. And so 3 of the kids out of 33 students volunteered to be the subjects of these stories. And Matt Rainey, the photographer, and I ended up spending a school year with them in their homes, in their neighborhoods. As I told you guys in class, I mean, I sat with Crips who had to give me permission to be with Al Malik. This is one of my favorite stories because this tells a lot about people that people judge. But one day I went up into the neighborhood where Tamar lived, and we were supposed to do an interview. And I went to his house and knocked on the door, and nobody was home. And he lived in a rough area, really rough area. And nobody was home, so I said, I think I'll just sit on the porch and wait for him. I had no fear because my experience has always been, if you're kind to people and you don't, what do I have to be afraid of? Most people are good. So I was sitting there, and all of a sudden I see coming up from the middle of the street these young men, big, beautiful, muscular young men walking up the street like this. And I thought, wow, they're strong. I wouldn't be a match for them. I hope they're not coming to hurt me. So they come toward Tamar's house, and they stop right in front of Tamar's house, and they turn their backs to me, and they stand there like this. And I'm thinking, what are they doing? And, you know, and I wasn't going to get up and go to my car. I just thought, well, I'm going to have to let this play out. And a few minutes later, here comes Tamar running up the road, and he had what he called his homies. They were Bloods. He had them come and protect me because he knew he was going to be late. And these, you know what, the kid had such a big heart, and he had such a good soul, and he did bad things. He absolutely did. But to get into his soul and be able to tell the story of the inner person was such a privilege and such a gift, because he just let it all be out there. And his mom and his grandma, they went along with it, and they said, people need to know the story of why these kids are doing what they're doing.
Definitely, yes.
So that was a Pulitzer Prize finalist. That was, I mean, we went to the go-go bar with Aisha when she was giving a lap dance to some old man, and she was facing a mirror. I'll never forget it. And we were behind her, and I remember just watching the tears stream down her eyes. And so you can judge a girl who's doing lap dances for money, but look at her face and look at that tear and have empathy, you know? So I learned a lot from those kids. I fell in love with those kids. I wish I could say it had a happy ending. I just looked them up 2 weeks ago, and you know, Tamar and Al-Malik, I haven't seen anything in the last few years, so maybe they're doing well, I hope so. But they went to jail, and
Of course, yeah.
yeah, and Aisha, I think, succumbed a bit to her mental illness. So there wasn't a great happy ending that we would all wish for. But the most rewarding thing about that series was I asked Tamar one day, Tamar, I don't understand why you're allowing us to do this. Your picture is going to be on the front page of the newspaper, selling drugs, you know, being with your gang. Your story's going to be in words. I'm writing your story, and we're not holding anything back. We've told you that. And he said, always called me Miss Robin. Miss Robin, because I want the people who come to the city every day and judge me to know why I do what I do and who I really am. I'm not that drug dealer. I'm someone much more than that. And after his part ran, there was a pilot from Newark Airport who called me in the newsroom and said, I just read part 3, I think it was, of the series, and I just want you to know I will never, ever look at these kids who are doing things on the corner the same way again. So Tamar got exactly what he wanted out of that, and I thought that was really rewarding.
I guess people need to know the real story so they stop pointing fingers, and your story did that for them. So actually, taking this conversation, we're going to go over what is going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
Social justice, police enforcement, the killings, the death of innocent men and women, and what can we do? I mean, we are writers, we're journalists, we are people that are constantly in contact with people, and we have to tell these stories. So, what can we do?
Well, first of all, we could be kind. And I mean, I have experienced this so many times in my life, and just today, coming here, as I told you, I couldn't find the number of this building. And anyone I came across on the street, I said, do you know where this number is? I had people walking me up and down Central Ave trying to find this number. They were so kind to me. And I think if you have no preconceived notions about people, if you just go about thinking, expecting people, most people, to be the way you are, and that is you have an open heart and you have an open mind, that comes back to you. And I think if more of us would do that, of all races and of all religions, I mean, I know I sound Pollyanna-ish, but I see it in our classes at Rutgers. The diversity is so amazing there. And when you all got to know each other, there was so much empathy and compassion for each other and respect for each other. And I think that it is a model of what the world really can be like. I don't know how you start that except as journalists, write stories about it, write stories of people who are forging peace together, write stories of people who just are working for kindness, to be kind to each other. There are bad police officers out there. I've seen many of them in my career. They're very bad. There are also wonderful police officers out there. The bad ones, just like criminals and who aren't police officers, need to be punished, right? It's as simple as that. And people have the right to march peacefully. And I think that message, that peaceful message, when people march quietly, I listen to everything they say. It's so